Now I'm going to show you how to make it look like there's light in the water. And what happens as waves spike up, that high point ends up being brighter than the low parts of the water because that higher part is letting more light in. And so you have a brighter area on each wave. Now, when a blue substance is lit up from the inside or from behind, which is different than just something reflecting off of it. Specifically, when it's lit up from the inside out, it becomes greener as it becomes brighter. If I want to light up something blue, like if this was a blue berry and the light was shining through it, it would be greener where it was brighter. So if I make it brighter, I need to also make it greener. So I have this tint. It's this brand Cal Tint, but it doesn't matter what the brand is. I just need some green pigment, and this is what I had laying around. I could also just use green paint, but I only need a tiny amount of it, so I just squirted some of that on this lid right here. This is not paint. This is pigment. All by itself, it won't dry hard. It'll just stay wet on the surface. It won't harden. So you can see that as I lighten this blue, I'm also making it greener. And any part of my water that I want to be brighter, I need to also make it greener. And that's totally different than the reflection that is a separate stage of the painting. So one way to approach what I'm going to do is to put that bright color down first. This is a much different method than what I already showed you. So I'm going to show you a different way of putting these waves together now with that in mind. If I know at the beginning that I want to have this effect, then I might start with the brighter color. Okay, so see how I have this brighter turquoise. That looks pretty good. So now it's the trough, it's the low part of the waves that's going to be dark. Those are the parts that aren't raising up above the rest of the water and getting brightened by the sunlight. So, since I know what the shape of my waves are, I know how to paint the troughs just like I did. So I'm going to use that exact same shape. Wider as it swoops down. I'm just painting the troughs now, which were my smile shapes. Painting the smiles. Okay, and then maybe another one swoops down in front right here, just like I did before. Here, let's do something different. Let's put one right there. Instead of making them perfectly staggered like I did before, I'll kind of put one in front of the other. So you can already see that this has a real specific look to it of the water having light inside of it. Put some blue here. Softening up these edges. Okay, and then maybe I have, this would be another trough way up in here. Now this I can be pretty sloppy with it, you know, it's just general placement of the colors. I'm not trying to be real exact and have all of the real pretty edges like I do when I paint the reflection on the top. I can make that effect as extreme or non-extreme as I want to. You know, I might make it only very slight. I can also come back when the picture's finished and add to it. Now I've got a smaller brush that I'm using. I've got it stuck in my water bucket here for the reflection. So my reflection color is just blue and white, and I'm going to try to avoid getting too much of my greens in this reflection color. Okay, then following those same rules, I'm going to make it the brightest on that downward swoop. And look how I have a template for where to put my bright reflection. It's a fun little pattern that's in these waves, that those darker areas happen to also be where the reflection is occurring. Make some there. Looks like I've got a few spots in here. I can just put a little bit in there. Again, I've got my brighter areas right here, and then I'm making it darker as I come down on this more level area. Fun thing about doing it this way is when you get to the reflection, you don't have to imagine it because you've already got it laid out with those shadows. If I was doing a big picture, I would do it just like this, where I do little by little. I know the colors that I made this with. I wouldn't lay it all down because I like the way this wet on wet mixes together if I'm using a lot of colors. But I don't have to do it that way. I could also just water down this reflection color and do a wet on dry technique also. I might come back and put some real bright highlights on there just like I did before. You know that this would be my brightest area of the wave. Right there. Maybe a little dot there. That's a good place for a highlight there too. Yeah, how about a couple more? Now I can also start with the dark color and add the light color to it. I'll do one like that also. So let's say I have my dark colored base down here. And then I want to brighten it up, so I'll add white and my green. You know, I just add kind of a triangle shape and round out the bottom a little bit. Remember that my crests are smaller and more pointed than the troughs for the most part. So this part is down here is going to be a little more level. Let's put some dark over here. Okay, then move to my reflection color. Mix my blue and white up here. Now, as a general rule, my closer waves, I really don't want to be quite as bright on the reflection as my further waves, because those are the ones that are at that angle that's tilted away from my eyes more. So I'd see more reflection on those. So I might just go ahead and leave the not so bright reflections on this guy down here. See, that's a big trough swooping in right here. Across there. So then this could start getting brighter if I continued this. I can make that the brighter color. This. So I put more of that reflection. And I can start using bigger strokes down here in the front. And see, I'm just filling in this low spot with the reflection. Just where one trough meets another one. Just like I've been doing the whole time. You know, and I can do the same thing here. I can make one real bright right there. That might be fun. You know, if I, let's see if it works out. This might be, I have a trough here and it's starting to come up, so maybe right here I can make the high point of a wave. So the brighter it gets, the greener it gets, but there is a max, you know, to it. I want to make sure that I add lots of white if I'm adding green, because I don't want it to look like it's filled with antifreeze. See, with that much green, I want to have lots of white. Okay, and then bring in my darker blue again. And I'll just redo that reflection that I'm painting over. No big deal. You can see that I don't let it come to a sharp point with that bright color. I round it. You know, I keep everything rounded. Okay, let's see if this is even bright enough. Sometimes the reflection color is not a lot brighter than other colors in the water. Sometimes it's even darker. So you can strategically, you know, manipulate it. You know, you can cheat a little and just use a pure white, or even switch to a darker color if you really want that reflection to be seen, you know. I think this is going to work right here. Yeah, I mean, for example, this is pretty bright in here. I might have a reflection. See, it's a little bit darker. And then again, I can make them smaller, 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 and as just a guide, I can use that rule of halves and doubles. I can make sure that halfway between this wave and my horizon is 1/2 of the size. So a wave like this is only going to be this wide. So let's go up here halfway and do a wave that's that big. You know, that's my guide. I can just use this little brush for everything here. Look how much green, that's way too much. I wouldn't see as much of that bright green as it gets further out on the water, because as it gets further out, I'd see more of just that, whatever color is reflecting down on it from the sky. Okay, so then, just like I did the big ones, I can do some smaller ones, very, very roughly following that rule of halves and doubles. There's just so much green that I put in there. That is a lot. So there's a good example of what it looks like if you put too much of that green as you brighten the blue. Pretty wild looking. One method I use to make sure that my brighter areas are always on those downward swoops is just do them first when I have the most paint in my brush. You know, I have pure white in my brush right now, so rather than going on a level spot, I'll go on a downward swoop and then use the remainder of it to do the more level areas. And if I continue that pattern of doing those first, and that'll help me to maintain those downward swooping areas being brighter. See, I covered a lot of that area with that reflection color and it flattened it out. Makes it look like flatter water. So that can look good in a painting when you do something that breaks the norm of the picture. All of a sudden there's a flat area on the water, and the more I add those little unexpected things, the more natural and realistic it can feel. There's an overall gradient where I'm seeing more and more of this lighter blue reflection color. I'm going to see less and less of this bright green, because even though it's a bright color, it's an underwater color. It's coming from inside of the waves. So I'm going to see less of it because I've got more of the reflection from on top and less of the window effect as it gets further away. So less of these green tips as I get further away. So this is real bright here and it looks cool and everything, but I need to start moving toward a lot less of that as I get up in here. So I want to illustrate this, and I want to show you how the perspective will look better if I follow that rule and add that gradient to it. Less of the green here than what I have down in here. And I'll add white. My base color altogether is not going to be as dark because none of those angles back here are facing toward me as much as these here. So my base is just my darkest, my most underwater color that I can see. When I get this far in the picture, I can just do a bazillion of these little strokes. See how I stagger them? Kind of revolve them, where I go from the middle of one to the middle of another. But you don't have to. I mean, they could be anywhere. It's a nice thing about this smaller brush with this real sharp kind of blade effect to it. So I can do those smaller strokes, get that detail. It is starting to look real geometric though. I mean, I don't think that's the most natural look. It does look like water, but it's got like a real distinct pattern to it. Now I do want you to notice that I've got generally more stretched out patterns. You know, as a wave is down here, I'm looking at it from a little more above the wave, so I see more of its three-dimensional shape like a bird's eye view. So it's going to be rounder. I might have more closer to a 90-degree angle where they're crossing here. But as I'm looking up here, I'm not looking at it from above anymore. So they're going to get flatter and more stretched out, and that always makes the perspective look better if you consistently stretch out the shapes as you get further to the horizon. I think that is a very common problem with achieving natural looking perspective is not stretching it out as it gets close to that horizon. Making it smaller is part of it. It's important to make it smaller, but you also want it to be flatter. And it can be fun to come back in and look for places you can do highlights. I do that with my hand to sharpen the brush. I like that sharp edge on it. Again, my highlights are on those. I'm looking for those angles. It's faster for me if I do all of the angles facing one direction, and then I switch around and do some facing the other direction, because it's faster than flipping my brush back and forth and back and forth.